The Cashed Up Poets, also known as the $1 Million Mini, a short story. The narrator, out for a drive, visits Booktown, hoping to rub shoulders with the literati. The broad sunshine of a rustic Sabbath morning being ideal for motoring, I scooted my neat blue 1972 Mark III Mini two-door saloon down the long back roads to Clunes, renowned as the Book Town, and parked salubriously near the post office, heading for a coffee and brunch. Clunes, of course, is nestled in a curly hollow. Such hollows naturally attract bookworms and literary aficionados. After the gold rush, and then the zinc rush, and then the nickel rush, and then the arsenic rush, Clunes had been reinvented as a prosperous book hub, a nostalgic haven in a world of failing literacy. On any given Sabbath morning you could possibly go there and have a latte with notable literati. My friend Brian had recently had a cappuccino there, quite by accident, with June Fotherington, the author of the saucy best-selling expose Candles and Whispers. Moreover, he had seen the radical deconstructionist playwright Noel Digby in the grocery store. It was that sort of town. It had also become a regular day trip for well-loved automobiles. The nexus between well-loved automobiles and book reading was well established. Thus, on any given Sabbath morning, you could possibly see a parade of well-loved Plymouth Coupés or Ford Thunderbirds rolling on rubber down Fraser Street or doing happy laps of Scenic Drive. My friend Ray, not long before, had seen and stroked a reconditioned Dodge Charger, home to 240 net horses at 4,800 RPMs, prince of the muscle cars, parked near the National Hotel. It was that sort of town. No sooner, however, did I step onto the pavement and soak up both the fresh eucalyptus wafts and the warming sun rays, and took a deep breath to imbibe the intellectuality, when an older gentleman of thin but somewhat shabby proportions approached and looked upon my vehicle with an attitude of lust. "Is this a neat blue 1972 Mark III Mini two-door saloon?" he asked, "or do I speak too soon?" Almost with a lilting affectation. "An original," I admitted. He pondered this for a moment and then stepped closer after noting the very fine condition I had rendered the said saloon in that morning. It was shiny in the sunlight. The Juco was bedazzled. I had polished it for hours. "I saw one of these, if you please, sold recently and decently for $30,000, he said, attempting a harmony. Then he tilted his head and looked at me in earnest, gazing through his spectacles, and said, "I'll give you $30,000 for it, right now." I returned with one of those blustery laughs. I was tempted to say, "Surely you can't be serious," but I was afraid he'd say, "I am serious and don't call me Shirley." Instead I said, "Sorry, not for sale," and smiled at the offer anyway. "The one sold recently was red," he said. "I'll give you $40,000 for this one, son." I was happy that he thought the blue paint job was worth an extra $10,000, but I still laughed it off and said, "Nah." At this, undeterred, he came back with $50,000 then. Might he be serious after all? He looked decidedly scruffy. "I'm not interested," I explained. "It's a generous offer, but no thanks." Which I expected to be the conclusion of the matter, after which I would stroll further down the street and around the historic corner towards Twanky's or some other semi-famous coffee vendor and rub shoulders with writers. However, the assailant continued. "All right," he said. "I'll fight," he said. $60,000 then." "It's not worth $60,000, I confessed. $70 then, and then again," he added with rhythm. I had to protest. "But I still don't want to sell it." He sighed. It was an exaggerated sigh, as if I had wounded his heart. "Gads," he he said dramatically, thrusting the back of his hand to his forehead. He seemed ready to burst into Shakespeare. He eyeballed me with the sort of weird intensity one normally only encounters in people from Western Australia. $100,000, he announced. 100,000 Oxford scholars. Finally, I had to ask the question, do you have $100,000? He looked offended. I can assure you, sir, implore you, sir, that my word is good and true. His stance was defiant. At this impasse, we both briefly glanced at my Mini, neat and blue, the object of the banter, then looked back at each other. I put my profiling skills to use. He was, I estimated, about 60-ish, a reformed hipster, carefully unkempt, thoroughly divorced, semi-vegan and undernourished, a shroom enthusiast, and had almost certainly been a secondary school teacher, English or social studies. Treat with caution. I'm really not interested in selling her, I said, now casting an intimate pronoun to underline my affection. Yet Mr. Scruffy would not be deterred. That I referred to the vehicle as a her almost made him swoon. I'll give you a cheque for $150,000 for her right now, he said. To whom do I make it out? And he reached for his chequebook. I am not interested, I said more firmly. And if I was, I only deal in cash. All right, cash, he said. $200,000 cash. Cash in a flash? I was suitably sceptical. You don't have $200,000 cash on you, I observed. You don't know what I carry in my socks, he said with grim determination. The Mark III Mini two-door saloon featured hidden door hinges, an improvement on the UK designs, and winding rather than sliding windows, also an Antipodean innovation. It was, of course, front-wheel drive. It blended into the charm of the Clunarian morn, the wide sky, the peppercorn trees, the rusted ice cream signs, scars of the zinc mine's dusty lament, the gnarled harmonies of old things. I'm going to get a coffee, I announced, and said, good day, at which I started to move off towards the yonder action. He called after me, $1 million, cash. I was more amused than affronted. I could have done with $1 million that morning, but I was fairly confident Mr. Scruffy didn't have it on him. I made certain my car was locked before I walked away. I then felt it would be droll to relate this encounter at the cafe I selected, where I was attended by a sturdily constructed barista named Reggie with a dangling ponytail. Greetings of the Sabbath, he said, taking my order. What'll it be? I'll have the eggs Benedictine and coffee, I decided. He thought this was a good choice. What table are you at? Not having selected one, I looked around. I turned back to Reggie, nodding towards the window corner where two bookish-looking characters were in idle conversation. Is that who I think it is? I asked. Reggie had a look. It is, he said. It's Richmond Carter, the horror writer, and that's Graham Castlebridge, the up-and-coming graphic novelist from somewhere near Maryborough. I felt satisfied I'd selected the right cafe. As long as Peter Carey doesn't turn up, I jested, knowing it would raise a smile of agreement, and it did. Somebody, I then saith to the barista, just stopped me and offered me $1 million for my Mark III Mini two-door saloon. Reggie attended to grinding his beans and without looking up asked, is it red or blue? I felt like it was a scene from The Matrix and wanted to say, who wants to know, Lawrence Fishburne? Instead I said, blue. Cups, said Reggie. Cups? Cashed up poets, he said, now looking up and sending the order for eggs Benny to the kitchen. He then told me to take a seat. I'll bring it out, he promised. I endeavoured, of course, to sit as near to Richmond Carter as possible. I was a huge fan of his Fountains of Blood trilogy, and even felt it not too intrusive lest I catch snippets of his conversation. I sat down and listened in. To my surprise, they were discussing duck shooting. It was fascinating all the same. Apparently a flock shot is considered poor form among keen hunters. The character from somewhere near Maryborough showed some concern for the welfare of the birds. I'm happy to say the author of Fountains of Blood showed none. When my well-constructed barista arrived with the eggs and coffee, however, I was more eager to round off our prior exchange. "Cashed-up poets, you say?" I said. He set the eggs and coffee on the table. "They're a nuisance," he said. "There's lots of them around here, rhyming everywhere, more money than sense." I was curious about this report. I would not have thought, I admitted, that there would be that much money in poetry. "There is around here," he said. "We're living through a book boom." Well, obviously so. There I was, having brunch right next to Richmond Carter. His most recent novel, Splatter Grill, had taken newsstands by storm. "I see," I said. I could see that, while I was dazed by the literary ambience, Reggie had worked there long enough to be weary. "The evils of affluence," I suggested. "There are few things worse," he said, in confidence, "than a successful poet." I raised my eyebrows at this admission, but he went on. "As long as they're penniless, they're fine. Sign them with the publisher, award them an arts grant, or pay out their superannuation, and they're insufferable." I could see he didn't want me to get him started, but I could also see how a cashed-up poet might be considered an unnatural thing. Clunes, being in a curly hollow, attracted both nuggets and pebbles. The downside of its renaissance was ageing, scruffy poets with too much money, wandering aimlessly around the streets, making the Sabbath morn look untidy. "He offered me $1 million for my mini," I marvelled, falling into alliteration. "He probably had it too," said Reggie, stuffed down his socks. The other nuisance in Clunes, but they are a nuisance everywhere, are would-be's. They would be writers, if they could write. Instead, they sit around in cafes in Clunes, especially either side of Book Week, and if you so much as speak to them, they whip a manuscript from their backpack and impose upon you to read it. It's a novel. Of course it's a novel. They've been working on it for years. The characters are based on real life. They'll only let you read it while they're watching, in case you steal it and become famous like a.k.a. Rollingberger or Ernest Hemingsmith. Might you know where they can get it published? But such nuisances are nothing compared to an affluent poet, I must say. Doomed to doggerel, desperate for fresh inspiration, they loiter around looking for things to buy or rent. For the most part, coffee vendors have come down hard on them. If one came in on Reggie's shift, he'd warn them. One rhyme and you're out. A well-loved automobile, of course, is an affluent man's last pedestal. A day trip to Clunes on club plates is the nostalgic man's pilgrimage to fading standards. A cashed-up poet might well say, "Money, it's but a metaphor," but a Mark III Mini, in my worldview, is a feat of Anglo-Australian engineering and a tangible comfort against flailing times. In any case, mine was neat and blue and parked salubriously near the post office. When I asked Reggie the name of my particular assailant that day, he had no idea, but brought the Matrix illusion to a happy culmination. "Some people take the blue pill," he said, "and some people take the red pill, and some people take the whole bottle. And that's where poets come from." At this moment I thought I heard Richmond Carter say something slightly literary, so my ears tuned into Richmond and out of Reggie, but it was another reference to blasting ducks out of the sky for purely recreational purposes. I was disappointed that the conversation I was eavesdropping on was not more robustly bookish, but then I thought, what better hobby for a horror writer than killing and maiming waterfowl? I was disappointed at the number of would-be's at the outside tables, hogging the sunshine too, and at the general lack of high-caliber writers that day. Booktown is a town of promise, but also pulp. Bookworms are worms after all. It reminds you of that line in Keats about the twisted reach of the long yesteryears you never knew you'd forgotten. While in town, though, I was hoping to pick up a signed copy of Janice Cobblestone's suspense thriller 3 in a Coffin at the bookshop. It had been all over the ABC. Instead, who was browsing in the new release section but the brash young writer from Brisbane, Harvey Monkhouse, whose tell-all autobiography had rocked the sordid world of modern pizza delivery. I just had to read it. He was a dashing chap. He dashed many doors in his day. He signed my copy, chatted, and we actually walked together outside into the sterling southern sunshine. "Nice Sabbath," he said, noticing the ongoing state of the day. "Splendid," said I. From this vantage, we could see my Mini, and I indicated that I would be returning home under its front-wheel locomotion. Harvey noticed not one but two Mr. Scruffys sitting on a bench nearby, eyeing off my vehicle, and he commented to me, "Cups," as one sane man to another. "Yes, I know," I said. He walked off in the other direction to see what else Booktown had to offer. Wow, I thought. Harvey Monkhouse, Confessions of a Pizza Delivery Boy. The reviews said it was snappily written with wit and grit, a spectacular small house publishing debut. It was a satisfactory Sabbath after all. For a moment I had wondered if perhaps I ought not have been so firm and swayed by a callous profile. $1 million is $1 million. But as I walked back to my $1 million Mini, I thought to myself, this is exactly why gentlemen keep classic cars and take day trips to Clunes, to reassert the virtues of classic design over sockfuls of easy cash. It also explained the aforementioned nexus. As I opened the driver's door and set my purchase on the passenger's seat, a bullhorn sounded, and, shortly after, a cavalcade of Chrysler Valiant Regals, 1972 V8 hardtops, in beautiful condition, rounded over the bridge and rolled right past Twankies one by one, rumbling in slow, steady procession. The Cups stood up from the bench. People came out of the cafes to watch. My God, I thought, 1972 was a great year for automobiles.